Hello, welcome back to the second week of our live and spooky month of horror. So, this October, just to recap, we are giving you double the episodes with double the chills. Each week, we are spotlighting the newest Flame Tree horror fiction titles to celebrate and fully embrace spooky season. On Tuesdays, we will be sticking to the usual format of 2 story readings, but with some added bonuses. Both stories will be taken from the horror book that we're featuring, so last week that was This Way Lies Madness, and we'll also hear from the anthology editors and the authors of the chosen stories about their work. Then, on Thursdays, we'll be hearing from many more of the authors in the anthologies, so you can find out more about their experiences, get a sneak peek into their stories, and sort of an idea of what to expect from these books in general. We will also reveal an exclusive offer for listeners, which will get you a 30% discount on our featured books. So, as I mentioned in last week's episode, we covered This Way Lies Madness, which is an anthology of dark stories featuring monstrous manifestations of trauma and guilt, paranoia and persecution, anxiety, addiction, crippling terror, you name it. This week we'll be heading into a feast of horror. The 2 stories we will be reading are from Fever Dreams, which is the 6th volume in our ABC of Horror series, edited by Mark Morris, who has been described by Conrad Williams as the irreducible rock of modern horror. It is officially out today, so this is truly never before seen work. I'm going to pass over to Mark now as he introduces this anthology and the whole series in his own words.
Hello there, fans of the scary and spooky. My name is Mark Morris. I've been a horror writer for the past 35 years, in which time I've had over 50 books published. I'm here today to talk to you about the ABC of Horror series, which I edit for Flame Tree Books. This is an annual anthology of non-themed horror stories, and the reason it's become known as the ABC of Horror series is because the titles are alphabetical. So the first title began with the letter A. I will show you the books. The first one was After Sundown. The second one was B, which is Beyond the Veil. The third one was C, which is Close to Midnight. The fourth one was D, which is Darkness Beckons. The fifth book was E, Elemental Forces, and I'm talking to you today mainly about the 6th volume, which is called Fever Dreams, which of course begins with a letter F. So Fever Dreams is out this month, and as with every other volume, it features 20 stories. The way I go about choosing my stories is I commission 16 stories from top names in the horror genre, and then we have an open submissions window every year where we invite readers or other writers just to send in stories, and I choose 4 stories from the stories that we get in. This allows me to feature some new writers, some younger writers, some unknown writers, and hopefully give them a little bit of a career boost among some other big name writers. My aim with the anthologies, really, with the series, is just for it to be a showcase for the very best writing that horror can provide, and also just to show the sheer variety of the genre. So in the books, there are grim body horror stories, there are supernatural stories, non-supernatural stories. Sometimes there are humorous stories, sometimes there are just plain weird stories. So it's a real mixture of approaches and styles, and you never quite know what's coming next, which is one of the things that I used to love about the anthologies that I read as a young person, as a young reader. I grew up on the Pan and Fontana horror series, and with the ABC horror series, that's something I want to kind of emulate in some ways, although without any reprints whatsoever. These are all modern, new, original stories. So what's in Fever Dreams? Well, I'll read a little bit from my own introduction just to give you an idea of the kind of stories you can expect. In terms of content, all human and inhuman life is here. Within these pages, you'll find tales of cosmic awe, of human depravity, and of monsters conjured from the darkest recesses of our own souls. Thematically, the class of 2025 delve into the horrors of toxic masculinity and identity theft, midlife disillusionment and lack of self-worth, intolerance and cruelty, and deep-seated trauma. Revenge, incarceration, home invasion, all are explored within these pages. But if this all sounds rather grim, be assured that there is also humour here, to leaven the darkness, albeit, admittedly, the laughs do invariably come with a generous side order of body horror. So, as you can see, there's plenty of to please every kind of horror fan. I hope you'll pick up Fever Dreams, and I hope you'll read it, and I hope you'll read and buy and read the other volumes as well, because they are all excellent. And if you don't know the horror genre at all, I think there would be a brilliant introduction to the genre as a whole. So, that's me. Happy Halloween, and enjoy the spooky season. Goodbye.
So, on to the first story of the episode, Piglet by Priya Sharma. This one, I have to mention, does feature violence, so be prepared for some unpleasantness there. But, again, before we dive in, let's hear from Priya herself as she introduces the story.
Hi, my name's Priya Sharma. I'm a GP and a writer. I mainly work in the arena of short stories and novellas. My story here is called Piglet, and it's my attempt to explore the experience of being a refugee through the eyes of a young boy who's fleeing civil war in Britain.
Piglet by Priya Sharma, from Fever Dreams. Piglet was tall for 16. He wore Blouchon's cast-off jeans, which were ill-fitting, and work boots. His jersey was stained at the armpits, and his hair, which he cut himself, made an unflattering frame for his face. His short nose was upturned, revealing too much nostril. Piglet's lips disappeared when he grimaced. He'd worked on Blouchon's farm since he was 8. He'd arrived in a truckload of pigs travelling from Dieppe. He remembered the noise and the press of their bodies, like the journey with his mother when they'd escaped Britain, packed in with the others in the dark. He had to be prized from her cold body when the lorry had been opened, somewhere outside the port. He saw the distant harbour lights briefly, before he was put in the boot of a car, and then the truck. Blouchon sighed heavily when he saw Piglet. "What am I supposed to do with this one?" "Louis thought you could use an extra pair of hands." "Tell my brother not to do me any favours in future. I need larger hands than these." "We can't take him back." "Put him in there, then." Blouchon pointed to one of the outbuildings. There was an old mattress on the floor with a blanket on it, and a sink in the corner. The men stood talking about the pigs, Blouchon leaning against the door frame, looking in. Piglet sat on the mattress, staring at a spider crawling across the wall. "Tell my brother if this particular piglet doesn't work out, I'll fatten him up and send him off with the others to be slaughtered." Piglet's eyes widened, and Blouchon chuckled. He switched to English. "You understand French? Who taught you?" "My mother." "Can you read and write?" "No. The schools closed just before the Second English Civil War." "Good. Remember that I'm not stupid like these fools, so watch yourself." Piglet gained lean bulk from carting pig feed about. He marked time by the animals coming and going. The sound of the piglet's squeals from the back of the truck brought bile to his throat. He cared for them in the vast barn until they were in their prime. Their pinkness was thrilling. It was a similar shade to the small plastic doll he'd found in one of the old sheds. It was naked, one of its blue eyes worn away. Its rubbery bumps and curves, and the pale nylon hair, made him feel strange when he ran his fingers over them. It confused him. The last woman he'd seen was his mum. She'd been limp, then rigid in death as the days ticked by. Her face was lost to him. It was easier to think about the pig's pink innocence before the burgeoning adultness of coarse white hair and dirt. Blouchon found Piglet in the barn one day with a piglet on his lap. He'd taken it from its compatriots. It lay on its side and Piglet scratched its belly and behind its ears. The animal wore an approximation of a grin, and Piglet smiled back at it. Blouchon crouched down before them. "She likes that, doesn't she? Is that one your favourite?" Piglet stiffened, unaccustomed to the mildness in Blouchon's voice. "You know what happens when they're grown. Tell me, Piglet, what happens?" "The lorry comes for them." "And after that?" "I don't know." The air was cooling and the fluorescent strip lights came on, casting out the dusk. "Pigs are born with teeth and working legs, but look at them." Piglet averted his gaze. He'd no idea what Blouchon expected of him. "They're born ready to fight." His fingers made a nasty snapping sound as they flicked Piglet between the eyes. "But they're docile and stupid." Piglet thought better than to try and correct him. "I'm going to do this as a kindness to you. You're nearly a man." Piglet was 12. "Stay right here. Don't move." Blouchon returned with a large kitchen knife. He put it in Piglet's hand and took the snuffling creature and held it down on the floor. It started to squirm. "Kill it." "What?" "Kill it." Piglet hesitated. "Don't make me repeat myself." Piglet looked at the blade that was an extension of his hand, this thing of flesh and metal fused. He put his other hand on the pig to steady it, as it was now writhing and squealing. He was suddenly aware of the life under its skin. It was more vivid to him than his own. Blouchon loomed over them, excited. It shocked him more than Blouchon's fury, which was commonplace. "Do it." The murder took much longer than anticipated. Piglet's hands shook and his breath came in fast. The baby pig thrashed and screamed, so that Blouchon put a knee on it in the end. Piglet sawed at its neck ineffectually. Blood splashed his hands and face. The give of flesh to metal sickened him. He felt the resistance of the tendons and windpipe to the blade's edge. The animal's suffering was magnified by Piglet's tenderness. The kill was botched by his reluctance. "Will you finish it?" He begged Blouchon. "No." Once it was over, the only sound was of Piglet panting. The pigs were silent. "Well," Blouchon spat, "you made a pig's ear of that, as you English say. Now I will show you how to butcher it." Piglet never held the animals again. Piglet woke often, the night constricting his chest, stealing his breath, and deadening his fingertips. He was clammy, even though it was cold. The outhouse walls were lost in blackness. He could be anywhere. He could be ate and in the back of a lorry, or he could be dead. He reached out to touch the wall, the crumbling mortar and brick grounding him. As Piglet returned to himself, he was aware of the pigs. Either they too had bad dreams that shredded sleep, or something had disturbed them. He knew he should investigate. Blouchon would give him a hiding if anything happened to the livestock. Then Piglet heard the deliberate step of hooves on cobbles. They paused outside, snuffling heavily. Piglet sat up and felt for his torch. He craved the light, but was too afraid to switch it on. Its weight in his hand would have to suffice. Blouchon had once told him, "Stay on the farm. There's a devil living in the trees." What if the devil had come down here to find him? The devil's breath punctuated Piglet's heartbeat. Then it fell silent, but Piglet knew it was still there, waiting. The moment stretched until Piglet broke and let out a sob. The devil in the night sighed, and then it was away, hooves moving at a pace. Piglet marked time by cycles of rearing pigs for unseen slaughter. He settled in the new livestock with feed and water. They jostled one another, unhappy to be away from the teat and traumatized by the journey. When he went back outside, mist still clung to the morning, making everything damp and chilly. Water droplets decorated the spiders' webs and softened the crumbling, blown brick buildings. Amid the missing tiles and peeling paint, only the farmhouse of thick, pale stone blocks had been built to last. Piglet walked around the now empty truck parked in the yard, treading as lightly as he could. He tried the rear doors, but they were locked. His heart raced, imagining the void within. No, he couldn't face that. He crouched down to look at the underside, then climbed up to peep at the cab. He could hear Blouchon talking to Henri, the driver. "Louis wants you to do something. It's a fun thing he's got into. He wants you to host it here." Piglet took a step back from the cab, stones crunching under his boot heel. The men came around from the far side of the cab. "You're a sneaky little bastard," said Henri. Blouchon stared at Piglet. "Don't mind him. He's a bit touched in the head, and his French isn't that great. Come on, come in and have a drink with me." The pair went into the farmhouse. By lunchtime, Henri had gone, and Blouchon came out with a bowl of cereal. Piglet leant against the wall, shivering as he ate it. Afterwards he rinsed the bowl and spoon at the outside standpipe and left them on the kitchen step. Blouchon came to the open doorway, cigarette in hand. He took a drag and then blew a line of smoke from the corner of his mouth. "I know what you were doing." Piglet pulled his sleeves over his knuckles. "You're thinking about running off." Piglet shook his head. "You can get up to the main highway on foot, easy, no problem. The hard part comes after. Do you know what's out there?" Piglet looked to the main gate, as if the answer were there. His world for the last 8 years, within the confines of safer memory, was the farm, Blouchon, the pigs, and the long stretch of grass beyond the boundary that ran into the trees. Only the sky changed, and that was a gift. Sometimes it was heavy with rain, and sometimes it was piled with pale clouds. "There's nothing for you out there. Run if you want, but it'll be worse for you. You're not meant to be in this country. You have no rights. You're illegal." Blouchon tapped a piece of paper on the corkboard beside the door. "You've not got any paperwork. They'll lock you up tighter than the pigs or send you back to England. You definitely don't want to go back there. You've got it easy here with me, Piglet. There are much worse places that Louis could have sent you." The devil had started to visit the farm more frequently. Piglet lay awake, listening for it. He heard it stop in the yard, sniffling the air. It waited for him with expectation, then walked on, disappointed. Its hooves fell silent as it went from the yard, through the gate and out onto the field. Piglet was tired of fear. He got up. His breath was visible in the cold night. He went out, scanning for a dark shape in motion. There it was, a shadow low to the ground. It disappeared into the body of the woods. A sound pierced him, a high-pitched call to combat. He crossed the field heading for the tree line. The oaks were always the last to shed in autumn. Their dead leaves were still clinging to the boughs. The wind picked up, bringing them down in great gusts. Piglet considered lying down and letting them settle on him until he ceased to exist. Piglet spent the following few days helping Blouchon clear one of the larger breeze-block sheds of twisted tools, empty crates and pallets. They dumped them in the paddock beside the old tractor that was gripped by ivy and weeds. The floor was wet in places, leaking from the corrugated roof. Piglet swept it as best he could. He and Blouchon dragged in hay bales and lined the room with them. They carried in chairs that Henri had delivered and arranged them in an arc at one end of the room. Blouchon had no time to chastise or bully Piglet. He kept checking his phone. "There are going to be a lot of people here tonight. Keep your mouth shut and do as you're told." When night fell, it wasn't a soft envelope of darkness, but dense and unremitting. The farm was the only reprieve for miles around, a pocket of huddled lights. Piglet went out to watch the cars arrive. A rangy man in tight jeans and gold chains directed them to park in the field by the gate. It was an egalitarian collection of vehicles, luxury SUVs lined up beside dented Renault Clios, rowdy young men with crew cuts and tracksuits piled out of them. A variety of tattoos were on display, marking their tribalism and vanity. And women. There were women. He'd never seen so many people in one place, not since he was a boy. The memory sucked his mouth dry and brought him out in a sweat. He hung back in the shadows and listened to their strident voices. A car was parked apart from the others, right outside the farmhouse door. It was a sleek machine. The engine idled and then died. The driver got out and opened the near-side passenger door. Piglet had never seen a creature like the one who emerged. His blonde hair was short and clean. His wire-rimmed glasses looked delicate. He wore a long woolen black coat and a roll-neck jumper. To Piglet's eye, he was sleek and regal. Blouchon stood above this stranger on the kitchen step. This version of Blouchon was new to Piglet. Clean-shaven and wearing a shirt and trousers. He never looked like that, not even when he brought a woman back. "Welcome, Louis," Blouchon said. "It's good to see the old place again, big brother." They embraced, but Blouchon stayed above him on the step. "You should come to Paris again. I'll look forward to entertaining you. You had fun last time, no? The ladies loved you." The driver opened the other doors. The two women who stepped out were young. Louis took one of them by the hand and raised it above her head. She twirled around and Louis passed her to Blouchon. The other woman hung back, cradling a bottle in her arms. She glanced over at Piglet, as if suddenly aware of being watched. He shrank back. "You like the look of her, so you're red-blooded after all." Henri, the trucker, stepped from the shadows. Piglet had been so intent on Blouchon's guests that he'd missed him. He sported a burgundy velour tracksuit and a baseball cap. Piglet would have coveted those clothes had he not seen Louis's splendor. "Don't let King Louis catch you staring at her. She's his favorite." It took about an hour for the shed to fill up. Piglet lingered in the doorway, but it was too much for him. Too many bodies jostled for space, climbing or sitting on the hay bales. He staggered to the safety of the barn, leaning against the pens, the rails pressing into his knotted stomach. The pigs grunted their greetings. It didn't soothe him. His panic was mounting to a pitch. He couldn't stand it any more, not this feeling or this place. Something moved in his peripheral vision. It was the girl, Louis' favourite. "Breathe slowly," she ordered. Then, "Watch." Her chest rose and fell by demonstration. It was a struggle to slow himself to match her, but he tried. The jarring scent of her shocked him back to himself. It was sweet and chemical. A memory washed over him, one he didn't know he had. His mother painting her toenails orange, the sun through the window drenching them both. Better? She waited silently while he gained control of himself. When he was finally still, she said, "If this ever happens again, I want you to remember this moment." Her eyes eclipsed everything. "Where are Blouchon and King Louis?" he asked. "Don't let him hear you call him that." Her laugh was a sharp bark. "No, definitely not." She slipped from French to English, his mother tongue. "You have an accent. You're British too? How long have you been here?" "I'm not sure. A long time. What about you?" "About 3 years. After the schools and universities closed, my parents and friends lived on a commune. They tried to teach us everything they knew, French, Spanish, history, and politics. They were arrested for being radicals, so their friends helped get me out." Piglet didn't recognize all the words, but he was entranced. To be spoken to at length without derision was precious. School. He recalled it, vaguely. There was a teacher and there were books. Living in a house. Piglet saw that his concerns had become those of the beasts, that of the belly, of sleep and warmth, the labour of his bowels, and at best, the needs of the herd. He had no other way to express himself, so it came out as, "I'm not an animal." "No, I know you're not. Neither am I. What's your name?"
"This little runt is Piglet."
Piglet turned at Blouchon's voice.
"He shovels pig shit. Go on, boy, get out."
"No." Louis took his hands from his coat pockets. The girl moved between them. "We were just talking, that's all." King Louis was casual. He put his arm around Piglet's neck, making him stoop.
"So, Blouchon, here's the solution to our problem. We need a fighter. Piglet can oblige. How does that sound?" "Ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of you ugly bastards,"
at which the crowd booed the compere.
"I'm assured that Gabriel the Destroyer is on his way, but as he's been delayed—"
The crowd booed louder.
Now, we've arranged a bit of light entertainment for you while we're waiting. Our normal rules apply. That is, no rules, and to continue until someone taps out or is dead. Got it?"
Piglet shivered. The mob writhed and jeered. Only the occasional face was bored and indifferent, more concerned with the money passing through their hands. His opponent was stripped to the waist. The man bounced on the balls of his feet and shook out his limbs. He rolled his dark, fuzzed head from side to side. He was agile and energetic for such a large man. Piglet started to gulp air. He couldn't get it far down enough into his lungs. There was no way out, every turn blocked by the rabble. The girl, now sat beside Louis, was the only stillness in the room. Piglet wanted to live in that stillness. He wanted to live. Blouchon sidled up to him.
"That's Adrian. He's going to play with you for a while. Nothing too bad. It's just for show. When he gets you on the floor and it's too much, give in.
Louis beckoned to Adrian, who went over, bending down to listen. Louis's hand covered his mouth and Adrian's ear as he talked. A slow grin spread across Adrian's face, and he nodded.
But not too soon,
Blouchon continued.
Don't show me up.
Piglet realized that he hadn't asked the girl's name.
Begin.
The compere clapped and slid back into the crowd. It was too late for anything. It didn't matter. He'd taken plenty of beatings from Blouchon when he'd been thwarted, drunk, or in a fit of despair.
Go on.
Blouchon gave him a shove. Adrian circled him, skipping sideways. Piglet turned on his heel to face him, his fists raised in imitation. He was overcome with an absurd need to laugh, a foolish impulse. Adrian's first jab was so fast that Piglet didn't register it landing on his side. It left him winded, but he moved back in time to avoid the follow-up blow to the mouth. Piglet realized this would be different to Blouchon's indiscriminate fury. This man was discerning in how he doled out hurt. Adrian kept him moving around the floor, herding him, tiring him. His punches were efficient. The crowd appreciated his conciseness. Piglet's wild swings flew wide. When Piglet fell back, many hands pushed him forward, screaming, "Hit him back, you idiot! Fight, for fuck's sake!" Adrian came in close. They were grappling now. Piglet was shocked by the forced closeness to his naked torso. They were both breathing hard. Something seared the side of Piglet's head, then a slick, wet feeling down his neck. There was the patter of blood on the floor. Adrian's grin was red. He spat out flesh. Part of Piglet's ear landed on the floor. The audience were giddy at the bloody morsel. The girl covered her face with both hands. Louis gently removed them, speaking quietly to her, but his mouth was contorted into an ugly shape. Piglet felt Adrian's hands on him, and the world was upended. He was thrown across the floor. All he could see were shoes and legs. Blouchon came into view.
Get up.
Adrian's boot landed on his chest, and he felt ribs crack. He curled up into a ball, his hands over his head. Blouchon dropped to the ground. His advice to Piglet changed.
Give in. Just give in.
Piglet rolled onto his back. "Please, stop." Adrian grabbed Piglet's arm and dragged him to the center of the room. Piglet screamed as his shoulder muscles were wrenched and torn. Adrian straddled him, putting his full weight on Piglet's chest. The pain from his ribs changed to something sharp and more insistent. His lung was on fire. He couldn't throw him off. Piglet felt something under his good hand. It was a nail that he'd missed when sweeping. The animal in him clamoured to live. He drove the nail towards Adrian's neck, but the man was fast and leant back from his waist so that it landed in the meat of Adrian's arm. He pulled out the nail with a flourish and put it between his fingers. Both his hands were fists. They rained down on Piglet, pounding and piercing and tearing, until Piglet lay still. The fighting continued long into the night. Once the scheduled fight between Adrian and Gabriel was over, men lined up to take an impromptu battering. The consequences were less serious, but they still wanted to feel the crunch of bone and the splitting of skin for themselves. Rebecca sat beside Louis, rigid, until she couldn't take it any more. She excused herself. He waved his hand a cold dismissal. She'd lost his graces, but knew he'd still have uses for her. She noticed Blouchon's sour expression, but he remained silent. Blood will out, after all. Rebecca turned up her coat collar and kept walking until she was at the gate. She watched the movement of glowing cigarette tips and heard the men's grunts as they dumped Piglet's body in a hole. She went off in the other direction, towards the forest. The trees parted for her. There was safety between the trunks. She stopped when she was weary and lay down between the roots of an oak tree and pulled armfuls of dry leaves over her. When Rebecca woke, colour was seeping into the dawn. She wasn't alone. The boar's breath was steam in the red bracken. Its body was leaner than a pig's, its bulk carried on shorter legs. Maned and bristled, it watched her with dark, deep-set eyes. The boar was a warrior. It was a berserker on 4 legs. She followed it, 2 free things, into a new day.
Thanks for listening to Piglet. I really wanted to write this story because, as we know, a lot of people who are fleeing persecution or war then go through terrible experiences to try and get to safety. And this is where we see human trafficking, human slavery. The UN Refugee Agency estimated that at the end of 2024, 123 million were forcibly displaced by conflicts or violence. And of those, 49 million were under the age of 18, which I think is a pretty sobering statistic.
A sobering story too, and an important one. Horror fiction can be this incredible tool to face the, quite frankly, horrifying reality of the current issues we are facing around the world. Thank you to our narrator, Amanda Benzecry. So, from a story set in France, we now take a long journey across the globe to Antarctica in the next. Let's hear from Caolán Mac as he introduces his story, 40 Below.
Dear gorgeous, Mr. Caolán. Hello, my name is Caolán Mac. I am a translator, classicist and poet from Dublin, Ireland. I write both in my native Irish and also in English, obviously. You can find me on Instagram at Writer Caolán, so that's Writer Caolán. When I'm not writing, I like to play my fiddle. A little bit more about 40 Below. So at the start of this past year, things are pretty tough in Ireland, so I was looking for ways to make more money. I decided I should get serious about writing. So 40 Below was actually the first story that I wrote after I made that decision. I think probably the most direct inspiration is Franz Kafka. Obviously the monster is the monster of the story. But it's also the bureaucracy that sent the guard out to Antarctica to be eaten. And then I suppose the other thing that I wanted to say was that I almost didn't submit this story. I distinctly remember sitting in front of my laptop, looking at the call for the anthology, thinking there's only 4 slots. All these famous writers are already in it. I haven't got a snowball's chance in hell of being accepted. And then I said, sure, look at what have I got to lose, and I did. So delighted to have made it. I feel very lucky.
"40 Below" by Caolán Mac. From Fever Dreams. The first thing the guard did every morning, religiously, without fail, was check the thermometer display on his wrist. Today, it was 30 degrees Celsius below zero. Once he had satisfied himself of this temperature, The guard dressed himself in his outside gear, parka, boots, snowshoes, wrapped up warm as warm could be, and poured himself a bowl of nutrient paste. Thus equipped, he went to see the man in the mask. Outside his bunker stretched the snowfields of Adderley Land, the French concession in Antarctica. This early winter morning, the sky was a bright, aching blue, and the white sun glimmered on the snowdrifts and gilded the ocean waves, some miles away but still visible. The snow crunched under the guard's boots as he made his way to the cave. He knew. It had been his job to know. He'd been a meteorologist before he came here. That often the snow in Antarctica was immeasurably ancient, that the flakes on the ground had frozen uncounted thousands of years ago and would lie frozen for uncounted thousands more. That is, unless some lout in clunking boots were to traipse across them with a bowl of nutrient paste. For this reason, he always tried to retrace the same route, to retrace even his exact footsteps, so that his route only ever showed 2 sets of footprints, one going to the cave, one going back. He did this even when he knew there was a snowstorm coming. The guard knew that others before him had not been so careful, and if others came after him, they would not be so careful either. But the guard knew that he had been chosen for this work for his punctilious nature, and so, every morning, his foot landed in the exact same spot. Every time he reached the cave, he tested the bars, even though the thermometer reading had been satisfactory. He did this because he was careful, but more so because he was nervous. The thing in the cave scared him. It was an Antarctic ice cave in the side of a hill, which became cliffs away inland. It was distinguished by the fact that it had 2 sets of bars blocking its entrance. The first was at the very mouth. The other was just where the lights began to fade. Set across from the cave on a pole was a camera, so that Control, at the base on the coast, would know if the man in the mask ever escaped. When the guard arrived, the man in the mask came to the second, inner set of bars to wait for his meal. Even so close to the mouth of the cave, the light was not good, and the guard could not make out details of the man in the mask. What he could see looked like a perfectly normal human being in a grey fabric jumpsuit, with black rubber gloves, black boots, and the mask which had led Peterson, in Control, apparently referring to some hammy movie, or maybe it was a French legend, to call him the man in the iron mask. The mask wasn't iron, obviously. The guard understood that it was some sort of titanium alloy, designed to be strong, flexible, and, above all, never, ever able to break. It covered the man's face, leaving slits at the nose, mouth, and eyes. The guard had often looked, but the man in the mask seemed to keep his eyes in shadow, and the guard had never once seen them. There was a control panel by the first set of bars, and trepidatiously, the guard punched in his code. A section in the middle swung wide, admitting the guard to the gap between the first and second set of bars. Once he'd stepped inside, he carefully set down the bowl of nutrient paste precisely in the center of the space created. He didn't know whether the man in the mask cared about this precision. In fact, he was sure he didn't. But it was important to the guard. All the while, though it was cold beyond words, he was sweating profusely. If he didn't make it back to his bunker soon, the sweat would freeze, and then he would have other things to worry about than the man in the mask. Once he'd set the bowl down, he scurried back outside the cage and punched a different code into the keypad. This caused the first section of bars to close, and then the second to open, admitting the man in the mask to his nutrient paste. The guard watched him step in, and thought of how wrong, how jerky and inefficient, how alien his movements were. The man in the mask picked up the bowl of nutrient paste and turned to regard the guard, his eyes still shadowed. Normally the guard would hurry away, but he'd checked his thermometer, and today he was feeling brave, and he met the gaze of the masked man. Though his eyes were hooded in shadow and his nature was entirely inscrutable, the guard held his gaze. Then, the man in the mask did something he'd never done before. He bowed stiffly. Though the masked man's grasp of normal human gestures seemed to be limited at best, the guard could see, in the fussy precision and military rigidity with which the prisoner executed his bow, more than a touch of mockery. Only once the prisoner had held this pose for a minute did he retreat into the darkness of his cave with his bowl of nutrient paste. The guard tried not to hurry back to his bunker, but the exchange had unnerved him, and worse still, there was now a ribbon of iron-coloured cloud at the base of the seaward horizon. Control, in one of their terse one-way messages, had warned him that a blizzard was on the way, and the thought scared the guard so much that if he considered it for more than 30 seconds he was liable to piss himself. For Peterson had warned him when he sent him out here that the electronics that held the man in the mask's prison closed would only work down to 40 degrees below Celsius. Any colder than that, and the 2 sets of bars would simply cease to function, and the man in the mask, whatever he was, would be free to roam. The guard made it back to his bunker and put on an old English comedy show, Porridge, today. This, too, was a routine. In his time here, he'd already finished all of Only Fools and Horses, but today he couldn't focus on the episode. His mind kept drifting back to his prisoner, circling around him like a probe around some alien planet. He had been recruited from the civil service, where he'd had a dreary job at an agency with a 3-letter acronym helping calculate blizzard risks. No one had ever told him why he'd been chosen for this posting. His career was not exactly stellar. Indeed, no one had singled him out for anything before, except for occasional meetings about taking the initiative or appropriate workplace etiquette. But he knew that he was meticulous and naturally assumed that this quality had finally been recognized. He had neither spouse nor children, so he'd told his parents via a brief phone call that he'd been selected to go to Antarctica for a very important mission. They'd politely congratulated him. He'd touched down by helicopter in Adderley Land 3 days later, head abuzz with his own importance and with the thoughts of the 150 grand salary he was to receive. Here he'd met Peterson, whom he'd taken for a smiling non-entity. Nevertheless, the non-entity briefed him on his one and only task: make sure that the man in the mask did not escape. Everyone at the coastal base in Adderley Land from which Control operated knew about the man in the mask, and they all had their pet theories about him. The guard, in the 3 days he'd spent there prior to his assignment, had been introduced to them all. The least imaginative held that the prisoner was a freak of nature, or that he'd stepped off a spaceship into a cornfield somewhere, and that the government had captured him. Others suggested that he was some kind of political prisoner who'd been subjected to horrible experiments, or even something that had been fished out of Mengeler's laboratory after the war. They all agreed on one thing: the man in the mask was not human, not in the broadly accepted sense of the word. Peterson did little enough to clear up this morass of mysteries. The man in the mask, he said, was very sick, and his illness made him both nearly immortal and very, very dangerous. How either of these should be the case, Peterson did not explain. He was being held in Antarctica to minimize the risk to human life in case he should escape, and he was to be held until the government had devised some sort of cure for his condition. In the interim, they needed someone loyal, someone trustworthy, someone careful, someone, in fact, like the guard. The guard preened a little before accepting his commission. In the months since he had accepted, the guard had found out little more about the man in the mask. He did indeed appear to be a man in a mask, and the fact that he was able to endure who knew how many months and years of confinement in an ice cave with only 2 bowls of nutrient paste a day would seem to indicate that he was, indeed, not a normal human being. Yet there was nothing else to be discovered. The guard had combed his bunker from top to bottom and had found no documents, not even handwritten notes from his predecessors guessing what the man in the mask might be. He tried to speak to the man in the mask, but the prisoner had not replied, and when the guard had returned to his bunker, he found there had been telegraphed a terse message warning him not to try communicating with his charge again. So, what the creature in the cave was remained obscure, and after turning the problem this way and that like a Rubik's Cube in his mind, the guard concluded that there was no answering the question and focused on his program. Outside, the wind began to howl, and the snow, there would be fresh prints in the morning, began to fall. At 5 o'clock, a little alarm went off, reminding the guard to feed the man in the mask. Reflexively, he looked at his thermometer and tensed. The thermometer display read 40 degrees below. The guard stayed glued to his seat, unable to move. Then, miraculously, the display ticked up to 39 degrees below. He glanced out of his window. The blizzard had arrived now, and it obscured everything. Quickly, he girded himself at the outside, poured his bowl of nutrient paste, then went out. The storm howled around him, and the greedy winter wind snatched at the bowl in his hand, threatening to send it spinning off into the untimely darkness. But the guards had been out in storms before, albeit not this bad, and knew how to keep a tight grip on the bowl. He struggled towards the cave, chagrined that the snowstorm meant he could not keep to his self-approved route, and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the bars were intact. But when he made it to the outer set of bars, his relief changed to horror, for the inner set of bars was swinging wide open. His only relief was that the man in the mask was nowhere to be seen. He wiped the rime from the thermometer display on his wrist. Sure enough, 39 degrees below. The bar should work. The guard remembered a protocol for dealing with this situation. Carefully, he punched the code Peterson had given him for this situation into the keypad. The outer set of bars swung open. The guard had a second to register terror before the man in the mask came sprinting out of the darkness, through the unlocked inner bars, through the unlocked outer bars, and barreled into the guard, sending him flying. He crashed into a snowdrift, crushing who knew how many thousands of ancient snowflakes, and was just struggling to his feet when the man in the mask appeared out of the snowstorm and placed a black rubber boot on his chest. When the guard was thus immobilized, the man peeled off his titanium mask. And when the guard saw the rows and rows of teeth, the smile that reached so much wider than any smile should reach, the piggy red eyes that never looked out of any human countenance, he screamed and screamed and screamed. But the blizzard wind took with it his screams, and in any case, they cut off abruptly. On the other end of the camera, the guard's screaming was noted by a man in a white coat, Peterson, who watched until the man in the mask had finished with his victims. Afterwards, he wrote neatly in a notebook the following words: "Feeding concluded successfully. Subject 773 died 12th October, endured 143 days. He paused a moment, then added, "The weapon appeared to enjoy him."
Narrated by Nathan Chatelier, there is one word I think that can ultimately describe this story: chilling. As summer has just come to an end here in London, we're racing towards shorter days and falling temperatures. But luckily, I don't think we'll reach anywhere close to minus 40 degrees. There are plenty more brilliant horror stories in Fever Dreams, so make sure to listen to Thursday's episode as we hear from more of the authors in the anthology. We'll also reveal that 30% discount, which you can use on the Flame Tree website. If you're looking for scares this Halloween season, you really won't want to miss this book. So, happy publication day, Fever Dreams, and we'll see you all on Thursday. Bye!